Hi everybody, good morning. Today I wanted to take you back with me on a trip back down memory lane. I wanted to show you the very first tarot deck that I ever bought. This is the 1JJ Swiss Tarot. This deck was produced in 1970. A.G. Mueller, printed in Switzerland. And this is back in the day, I guess, when U.S. Games was based out of New York. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a story because this was the first deck I ever bought. I was about 17, maybe 18 at the time. I used to go back in those days, drive down to downtown LA, Hollywood Boulevard, visit Tower Records, the Greek Theater. I actually saw Cat Stevens at the Greek Theater back at about that time frame. That was one of my most memorable events, although I can barely remember it now because it's been so long ago. But I had bought this deck and brought it home, and for various reasons which we'll go into a little bit later, I did not learn to read with this deck. I found it fascinating. It drew me. Tarot had called to me, but this was not the deck with which I learned to read. But I found it interesting, and I used to pull the cards out and just sort of look at them and enjoyed the artwork and the sense of being in a different time. My mother had this deck at her house. I moved out. I didn't take the deck with me. I'd forgotten it. So my daughter, who's now over 40, my daughter had this deck in her possession. My mother gave it to her, and my daughter had this deck. My daughter had an interest in tarot, and I was pleased about that. She had bought several decks. She was studying to read the cards, and she actually knew quite a bit. I would say in certain areas, probably knew more than I did. But sad to say, or I don't know if it's sad or not sad. But anyway, she became converted to a fundamentalist Christian church, and so the other day I visited her and I said, hey, you know, I'd really like to have my 1JJ Swiss tarot cards. I'd like to do a walkthrough on my YouTube channel. She said, oh, Mom, I threw out all my tarot decks. I said, even that one? That was mine. So my heart just sunk. You know, she could have offered me her decks. I would have been happy to take them, but apparently she views them now. For whatever reason, I don't want to get into arguing with her because that's just not who I am. You know, I believe people are entitled to their own beliefs, and I'm not going to fuss and fight and argue, especially with my daughter. So I went on to eBay, and I found a set that looked exactly like the set that I had. I had this set in a box, and I went ahead and bought it. I was able to get it at a really reasonable price. I know some of these cards are going for quite a bit. In the older editions, maybe $60, $70, $80, but I think I was able to get this deck for like, I can't remember, I think it was about $22, $23 plus the shipping. So I didn't feel too badly about that, but I would have liked to have had my original deck. But, you know, on the same note, you know, I received these cards. They were used, lightly used. I could tell they were out of order, and they're in good condition, but I thought, I'm going to put these cards under my pillow. I don't know what I was thinking. I put the cards under my pillow, and for the first time in I don't know how many months, rather than my having them under my pillow, I kind of was thinking in my mind it would be a method of cleansing, but it really was not. It was just the bad vibes from the cards. I had nightmares all night long, and every time I woke up I thought, I've got that uncleansed deck under my pillow. I mean, it sounds crazy, but you know, that was my experience. So what I did, I took the deck out, and for the last few days I've had a celestite crystal upon it, and I'm going to also do what I normally do. I normally put all my magical tools under the light of the full moon. So the next full moon, that's where this deck is going to go, and I'm not going to use it for any divination until I do that, because I just thought that was kind of weird. So, you know, the cards looked in such good condition that I thought they were brand new, but obviously they've been used or in the possession of somebody who's imparted some negative energy to them. So anyway, let's get right into this unboxing of a used deck. Hardcover, very nice. Stuart Kaplan is the person who brought these cards to us. And I'm going to just show you a little bit. This is not a white book. This is just a flip out piece of paper, but it has a lot of information included here. The introduction tells you about the origins of tarot, the meanings of the cards. Now, I found this interesting. It is suggested that beginners use only the 22 Greater Arcana cards, and after having developed a satisfactory procedure of spreading cards, the individual should obtain the 96-page illustrated book, Tarot Cards for Fun and Fortune Telling by S.R. Kaplan. This book is the only complete and authentic guide to the spreading and interpretation of the popular Tarot 1JJ deck. Well, you know, back when I bought this deck, way back when it first came out, there was no internet. There was no Amazon.com. And even though I probably would have liked to have had that book, you know, I never got it. It was too difficult back then to buy things that you wanted. And, you know, you had to keep in mind, oh, I'll have to go out and search for this in the stores. And the best that you could do back then would be to call the store and say, do you have this book, or do you have whatever it is that you're looking for? Because this little flyer contains a lot of information, including the meanings of the major arcana. And I'm going to let you, if you want to stop the video and take a screenshot of this, I'll try and hold it still so you can do that. But here we have the major arcana, the French and English terms, and the suggested interpretations. But there's nothing about the minor arcana in this sheet, nothing whatsoever. The only thing they mention is that the épées or swords correspond to spades, the coupes or cups correspond to hearts, batons or scepters correspond to clubs, and deniers or coins correspond to diamonds. So they're not even corresponding these to other tarot decks. They're corresponding these to playing card decks, which I found interesting back then and still find it today. Then they talk about how there's an additional court card from regular playing cards, and they do go through the major arcana, but beyond saying this is this suit, that suit, the other suit, nothing, like zero in this about the minor arcana. So because back then I was totally fresh to tarot, I knew nothing about it, I was interested to learn, but this did not provide me the tools to learn to read. So that's the reason why I kind of forgot the deck when I moved away from home, and my mother had it for years, and then it fell into my daughter's hands. The cards themselves, let's take a look at one of them here. This is the old Marseilles style deck. And the images themselves are not what a lot of people would consider. You know, today we have thousands of tarot decks to choose from. And some that are very artistically beautiful and innovative. This is very true to the medieval look. The cards are wood blocks, so the faces are sometimes, you know, unpleasant to look at. Take a look at this face. The colors are very, I don't know the term, primary colors. We've got your red, yellows, blues, greens, and brown, and of course black and white. So the cards by some people may not be considered the most attractive. I know I didn't consider them attractive for years, but I thought of this as, it drew me for other reasons, for esoteric value, I believe. I kind of was fascinated by the cards, although I didn't really understand them at the time. So the cardstock is semi-matte. It's pretty much like playing cards used to be, or still are. It's very, very nice, thin, flexible. Now this deck, in its original incarnation, came with 2 blank cards. I don't know what the point would be. I guess you could do whatever you want with those. I imagine because when you're printing this deck, there would be 80 cards as you divide it across a printing cutting desk, and so they just threw in the extra 2 cards. This 1JJ Swiss deck is what is referred to now. I recently found this out. It's called a Besancon deck, and what that is a variant of the Marseilles. It was originated in Besancon, which I believe is in France, and what they did was they substituted Juno for the High Priestess and Jupiter for the Hierophant. So apparently somebody back in the day objected to the images of a papist and a pope, and they substituted instead something more classically Roman, Juno and Jupiter. Other than that, the deck is pretty true to Marseilles. The pips are illustrated, but they're not what you would call scenic. And as I said, some of the faces are not necessarily beautiful or pleasant to look at, but they're made from woodcuts. This is a reproduction of a woodcut deck, so you know, it is what it is. I find it nice to have something that's historically accurate and to really get the sense of what things were like back in that day. And the Besancon deck was first, this particular Swiss deck was first printed in 1860. All right, so let's go through the cards here. We have 2 blank cards included with this deck. I'm assuming because the printing process is probably, you know, 4 by 20 or something like that, that there are a total of 80 cards, so they just throw in the blank ones rather than throw them away, which is kind of nice. You could probably use them for something that you would like to do independently. The backs are this nice plaid color, reversible. Okay, we have Le Mât, or the Fool. The colors in this deck are jewel tone, is how I would describe them, and they're primary colors, red, yellow, blue. There's green and brown also in some of the cards. Here is Le Bateleur, or the Magician. This is, he's got his tools here, and these are more, I think the balls are indicative of more of a street magician rather than a magical magician, rather than someone who practices magic. But he does have his wand. You get the feeling that something might be concealed behind there for his trickstering. Here is what would be the High Priestess today. In the old days it was the Papist, and in this deck it's Juno, or Junon. She's got her corresponding animal, which is the peacock. So I've always felt drawn to Juno and the peacock, and I love this card. I think it's really beautiful. Next we have L'Impératrice, which would correspond to the Empress. Her face is not too pleasant, the woodcut image here. But I love the flow of her gown, the colors. I love the scepter in her hand. She's pointing upwards, I don't know why. This is more the way the Empress used to be portrayed in the decks, more as a ruler rather than an Earth Mother. So that is the Empress in the way that she was traditionally portrayed up until the modern era, where she's more pictured out in nature and as a mother. This is more as a ruler. Here we have number 4, L'Empereur. Here we have the maker's information on his shield. Had to advertise even back in the day. And you'll notice in some of these cards they use the successive numerals, such as instead of IV, they put 4 I's to indicate 4. But it's not consistent throughout this deck. There are a couple places where they do use the IV numbering. So I don't know if that was just carelessness back when they made the deck or if there's a reason for it. But this is a very cool emperor. And instead of the Hierophant, we have Jupiter with his eagle. He has sort of a bored look on his face. Nice card. Here we have the Lovers, the way they were portrayed traditionally. She's got the 2 gentlemen here, and it's more of a card of choice rather than physical love. It could be regarded either way in a reading. And here we have the Chariot. So you can see that even Rider-Waite was not that original. It's the same idea. The charging animals going different directions, the rider without reins, the canopy, the chariot. Although why he's disjointed totally from this chariot down here, I don't know. I suspect that, well, I'm going to talk more about that later. I think that this deck was produced in the 1860s specifically for divination. That's my suspicion. And I'll talk more about it when we get to the minors. Here is Justice, La Justice. She's got her sword, her scales, a rather stern look on her face. She's got an armored leg there. L'Ermite, the Hermit. Card number 9. See, we have VIII instead of IX. But he's got the lamp and his staff, and I like this hermit. The very monk-like hermit. Even down to the haircut there. Here is the Wheel of Fortune. This is a really cool card in this deck. There's a cliff here. So you may be on top today, tomorrow you may be in the abyss. And you may not see it coming. Wheel of Fortune, and she's blind. So whatever happens to you is just because, not necessarily any rhyme or reason to why it's happening. Next we have La Force, a gentleman with the lion rather than a lady. He's put down his club and he's subduing the beast physically with his bare hands, as you would say. Here we have number 12, Le Pendu, or the Hanged Man. I find this Hanged Man interesting because I know back in the day people would be hanged for offenses, and they would hang them until they died. And so this is more an accurate historical representation of a hanged man from back in the Middle Ages, more so than the images we see today where they've got like a bright sun behind them, all this cheerful stuff going on, their leg is crossed. This is more accurate to me. His face is not serene, it's the face of someone that's approaching death. And then lo and behold, followed by the death card. So the succession is true. So here we have death. Next we have temperance. We still have the same numbering system of progressive with the 4 I's instead of a XIV. This is a very pretty temperance card, and it's very clear that she's mixing, alchemically mixing fluids there. In some temperance cards, you can't even really see that going on. It sort of blends into the figure. So I like this temperance card. Here's Le Diable, number 15. And I like this tower. They call it the House of God, La Maison de Dieu. kind of a biblical Old Testament feel of how God is going to strike you down. Don't get too cocky, because your tower might fall. I get the feeling in this, since they're calling it the house of God, that this may be a church rather than a tower. L'étoile, or the star, card number 17. Beautiful. It's very beautiful. My only issue with the aesthetics of these cards is the faces. Because of the wood cutting process, I think they're very coarse looking. But, you know, it also lends an air of authenticity to the cards, that they were produced so long ago, when mass producing meant that things looked a little more coarse. Here is La Lune. This is different from today's decks. Here we have a gentleman serenading a lady under the moon. We've got a dog there. And here is the lobster, whatever you would call it there. La Lune. Le Soleil. A very nice sun card. I like this better than some modern day sun cards. I like it better than Rider-Waite. The face in the sun is okay. I like it all right. And we've got people enjoying the sunshine, reading, out in nature. Very pretty. Le Soleil. Le Jugement. Here we have the angel blowing the trumpet. And the awakening. And Le Monde. Very nice. Now I'm going to compare in the minor arcana numerologically, like we're going to look at the aces first. So here are the aces. As you can see, they're all very beautiful. We have the Ace of Swords, clubs, cups or chalices, and denier or coins. And an interesting fact that I read someplace about the origin of the suits and how they came to be corresponded with different classes of people is that these swords represented the military and the ruling class. The clubs represented merchant class. The cups represented the clergy, who were very important in days of the past, more so than they are now. Very prominent politically, so that represented clergy. And the denier or coins represented the peasantry or the working class. So just as an aside. So here we have the very lovely Ace of Swords. Now in 3 of these suits, not only do you have the image, but you have the number down in the corner here. I know I was watching a Tom Benjamin video where he said he had to go into some of his Marseilles decks and mark in the corner so that he could use it for reversals. This deck has already done that for you. And that is why my personal belief is that these decks were used for divination at this time. The time they were printed was 1860, and there was quite a bit of cartomancy back in those days and divination going on, so I'm assuming that's what these were purposed for. Here is the 1 of Besancon, or clubs. And the suit that does not have them marked with numbers in the corner is the cups, because the cups you can easily see if they're upright or upside down. And here we have the Ace of Denier. Just beautiful. Look how intricate that is. And the denier also have marked in the corner the number of the card. Next we'll move on to the 2s. So even though this is a pip deck, the minors are illustrated beautifully. They do not have scenes on them. They're basically pips, but the information is there if you kind of look for it. You kind of get the feel. They add little different elements to the cards that help you kind of get the feel of the card. So in a lot of these older decks, the 2s were used for advertising purposes. Fabrique de Carte Schaffhaus. That is the Two of Coins. The Two of Cups, same thing. Mueller and Company. Isn't that a beautiful Two of Cups? Love it. Here we have the Two of Baton. Now you can tell the difference between the swords and wands. The swords are curved. The wands are straight. The swords have sharp ends. And the wands or batons have blunt ends. So here we have the Two of Wands. And the Two of Swords. Same thing with the threes. If you'll notice, all these threes, for instance, particularly in the cups, threes are associated with the Empress and fertility and fruition. So here we've got fruit. So I love that card. To me, that's perfect. Here we have the Three of Denier, which has sort of an artistic feel to it. Three of Cups. Three of Baton, or Three of Wands. And the Three of Swords. I still don't know too much about reading Marseilles decks. I've ordered the book Tarot on Earth by Tom Benjamin, and I'm hoping to get it in soon from Amazon. And I think that should be a very interesting read for me. I've been waiting all these years since 1970 for some source for that, and now I finally have one, so yay. Next we have the Four of Coins with the shield there. I'm assuming that's to imply stability. The Four of Cups. Four of Wands. And Four of Swords. Five of Denier or coins. Five of Cups. Five of Baton or wands. And Five of Swords. I think these Marseilles decks are pretty. The longer I work with them and look at them, the more I see. Next we have Six of Coins. Six of Cups. Look at the little bells there. Six of Wands. Six of Swords. Seven of Denier or coins. Seven of Cups. Seven of Wands or Baton. Seven of Swords. Eight of Denier or coin. Eight of Cups. Eight of Wands. Eight of Swords. Next we go on to the nines. Here we have the Nine of Denier. Notice it's IX for coins. It's VIII for cups. IX for batons. IX for swords. So I don't know why just the one suit. Now if you go back to the fours, the Four of Denier is III, but when you get to nine, it's IX. So I don't know if that's a mistake. Same way with cups. III, oh, VIII. So that's consistent. And then the Four of Wands. and the Four of Swords are in the more traditional numbering, so I don't know. It doesn't seem consistent to me. I think maybe it was a mistake back then, or I don't know. But anyway, there are the 9s. And C for you, Tom Benjamin. They're numbered in the corners. Next we have the 10s. 10 of coins. 10 of cups. 10 of wands. And 10 of swords. Okay, then we'll move along to the court cards. These are the valet, which would correspond to the knave or the prince. We have the valet des épées, which is the valet of swords. Valet de bâton. Valet de coupe. Looks very intent, doesn't he? They're all looking right at their element except for the sword person. Valet de denier. All right. We'll move on to the knights or chevalier. Since cheval is a horse, they're all on horseback, so yay. Chevalier des épées. Chevalier des bâtons. See, they put des bâtons for some, but de bâton for others. So, I don't know. I studied French, and I don't think that's grammatically correct, but hey, nothing's perfect in this life. Here's the Chevalier de Coupe, or Knight of Cups. Chevalier de denier, Knight of Coins. Here we have the queens. See, some are de and some are de. Grammatically, I don't know, maybe they were interchangeable back in the day even. I know today that maybe some of our French viewers can enlighten me on that. Here's Reine des épées. I love her. She's beautiful, except for her face. But she can't help it. She was born that way. Here's the Reine de Bâton. Reine de Coupe. They're all just beautiful, except for their faces. This one really was hit with the ugly stick. Here's Reine de Denier, or the Queen of Coins. Poor gal. Okay, next we have the kings. Roi des épées. Roi des bâtons. Roi de coupe. And Roi de denier. I rather like him, and his face isn't too disagreeable. So that's my walkthrough. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will talk to you next time.